On blast.
Thank you. Far too kind for tuning in once again to a little thing we like to call the On Blast podcast. As always, my name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by my guy, Andrew Webster. Webby, what is good?
What is up, Sheldon? We are just living that quarantine life. Sun came out here in Calgary the other day, so it's like 20 degrees out here. Sun is shining, and you can't go for a patio beer anywhere except on your back patio. That's basically what we're doing. But, Sheldon,
Yes.
we're going to have actual sporting things this week. The NFL draft is on Thursday.
Yes. I mean,
I'm very excited.
I can't lie to you. I was watching a WNBA draft, and I've watched the WNBA first off, so that's a thing. Like, even in normal times, I rock with the WNBA. So I was watching a WNBA draft last week, and I was just amazed at how dope the production was, like, in these times where, like, obviously it's not normal production for ESPN. Everyone's at home, right? The commissioner's at their house, all the players are at their house with their families, but it was smooth sailing, like the way that they were able to operate that draft. And it was just a precursor, obviously, to the NFL draft and a good test run for everyone involved. So that was cool to see. And yeah, I'm excited for the NFL draft.
Well, my fingers are crossed that it does not go that smoothly, because I want to see these 32 GMs just absolutely crap themselves with how to deal with this new technology. And I want to see people have to forfeit picks if they can't get them in on time. I just want chaos for this NFL draft. I can't wait.
Well, yeah, the NFL draft is one thing obviously on the docket that everybody will be talking about this week, but there's another thing that the sports world, but I'd say the world, as the ratings came out for ESPN anyways. 6 million people tuned in to watch the very first episode of the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN, The Last Dance. Episodes 1 and 2 hit the airwaves. And I don't know, when you add in the times that we're in, has there been anything more highly anticipated than this in recent memory? Right? Like when you add in the times that everyone's sitting around?
Not in like the kind of like cultural like zeitgeist that we're in right now. Like people on the Saturday were like, oh, what Jordans am I going to wear to watch this show in front of my TV or my computer? It's like, but man, this is something that, I mean, you and I grew up in a similar age, and like as Jordan fans, is like the one guy really that everybody can point to that got us into NBA basketball, even college basketball, as a result of the love of NBA. Everybody was just, we couldn't wait for this. Like, this is, and you know what's awesome too is that, like, for that first 2 hours, I feel that it definitely delivered. I was not worried about the hype not being able to live up to, because look at Michael Jordan's career. Every time the pressure was on, every time he needed to come up with a big basket or a win, he did it. And why would this documentary be any different?
You know what's so crazy about what you just said? I was kind of in the same realm where there were parts of me that was like, wait, is this going to live up to the hype? Because it's Michael Jordan, and of course we're going to all want to love it because it's MJ, and that's our dude if you're of a certain age. But also, is it going to live up to the hype just in terms of ESPN tells such great stories all the time? And it's not like they have letdowns, but this is definitely one that it's like, yo, don't fuck this up, right? But the hype machine was there, and even just through the first 2 episodes, like we're going to deep dive into it and what we liked, what we didn't like, all that stuff. But just the way the first 2 episodes, they were able to tell you the full story, like tell you, okay, we're setting up the time and place. It's 1997. They just won the 5th chip, and shit's about to hit the fan. Are they going to blow it up? Are they all going to come back? Like, they're setting the scene, right? Ahead of the start of the next year, but also how they were able to put you in that time and place, but then also weave back into MJ's life in childhood and high school, and then did the same thing with Scotty in the second episode. Like, it was so perfectly well done to tell all those different stories while still bringing it back to the main feature of The Last Dance. Like, I was so impressed by how well they're able to do that just through the first 2 episodes, right? And if they're able to keep that up, oh man, this is going to be amazing.
no, it's an incredible way to frame the story of Jordan and his career is through that season.
Mhm.
And just because not only was it so compelling in terms of the storylines that were going on,
Mhm.
but that's when they had that full year of footage
Yeah.
of following Jordan around from before the season started to its culmination. And I thought I agree with you, like the framing of the story of going back in time, and then even with Scotty's story as well,
Yeah.
and then going back through that timeline was really I that was the thing that I was a little hesitant about because I really love the OJ documentary, and the
Mhm.
OJ documentary was very much a linear story.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is what OJ's life was like when he was growing up. Now we're going to get into racial politics of Los Angeles before this happened. So I really like that linear style of storytelling for the documentary. But I thought that this was a real risk for them to take. But I thought, especially in the first two episodes, it worked out really well.
Yeah. Because even like in the first episode, they introduce you to everyone, right? Like, here's MJ, here's Scotty, here's Phil, here's Rodman, here's a little bit of what's going on with all of them, right? They tease you a little bit of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Kraus, obviously, which we'll get into, who's a major factor, who we'll talk about for sure. But I love that before we get into the episode though of the Last Dance, I love that you brought up the OJ doc because to me, before we start, I kind of wanted to talk about how we got to this point to where this documentary was a thing because I think that story was super interesting. I don't know if you saw Ramona Shelburne had an article that I think she dropped on Saturday, and like that was the thing that got me super excited after reading this story because there's just so many little intricate details that like basketball heads or basketball nerds like us will really appreciate. So like the first thing was that the person who put this on, who like filmed the whole thing and whose idea it was Clay Thompson's uncle. Did you know that? Like that's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
weird.
Michael Thompson's brother.
Yeah,
Yeah, who worked for the
Andy
NBA,
Thompson. Yeah.
and just to have that like simple idea of like guys like going to the NBA and being like, we have the biggest star on the planet. Like maybe we should follow him around for a year. Like
Yeah.
we can at least get, but like the money that was behind all that because like to get to. I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast today, and he was talking about there was a DVD and there
Yes.
was a DVD floating around, and it was that. It was the footage that had been edited down to maybe like 2-3 hours. Like, I remember. Well, I'll tell you, this will kind of date me how old I am, but like before South Park came out,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
cartoon, there was the tape of like their first like episode before it even came on air,
Okay.
and my buddy had a copy, and it
Okay.
was like you put that in, you're like, oh, this is going to be a big deal. Like I can't believe I'm seeing this before it's even going to blow up. I can't imagine seeing that Jordan footage like before it became to what we're watching
Yeah.
now, because I'm sure there's like some crazy warts in there of him going off.
Right? Like it's so incredible. So as the story goes, this guy Andy Thompson, Clay's uncle, worked for NBA. He was a producer at NBA Entertainment back in the day, and so he would also be like going around and shooting things because they really looked at NBA Entertainment as a way to archive their stories, right? So on the side, my guy had done some home videos for MJ and his family like already. So he already had kind of a relationship by the time they floated this idea. And he went to his boss, and who was in charge of NBA Entertainment at the time?
I was just gonna say, do you know who was running NBA Entertainment at that time? Of course, it was Adam Silver,
Of course.
Nosferatu himself.
Of course, right? Adam Silver. And it's just so cool how those stories intertwine. So Adam Silver says, yep, for sure. Let's go to Reinsdorf with it. Reinsdorf says, if you can convince Phil and Mike, then we're in, no problem. Phil understood it and got it right away. Phil was like, I'm in. And then Mike, they had this like great negotiation where Silver's like, well, actually, Silver said it wasn't a negotiation. He was just kind of telling him that, listen, there'll be a negotiation when we need to have one, but we're going to shoot it. We need to get the footage first. We can negotiate all the details later, but
Yeah,
we'll shoot it and we'll just leave it there, and neither of us will be able to use the footage without the other one's permission. And so it just sat there in like a vault in their offices in Secaucus, New Jersey from after they after they filmed it until until, as you mentioned, the DVD was made because so many other people tried to get this off the ground. Whether it was, there's some crazy names in here. Frank Marshall, Spike Lee, even Danny DeVito at one point tried
Yeah.
to get this thing off the ground, and no one could even get a meeting with MJ until 2016. Like, that's incredible.
And you know what happened in 2016, right?
Oh, we do. Just happens to be the year LeBron came back and from 3-1 down and won the championship. And
And there were a lot of people that we know, a lot
mhm,
of people on the internet that were saying, "Oh, LeBron is the greatest of all time now. This puts him number one on the list." And you know, like a competitive guy like MJ is just nah. People, the people need to know. The people need to know.
I mean, it's a great, like, I'm not going to call it a coincidence because I do think it has something to do with it. But remember, even LeBron, there was a video that came out last year in which LeBron said that he thought that chip was the thing that made him the greatest. Right? Do we remember that? LeBron's
I
on wax
remember
saying
that.
that. So it's very interesting that it happened at that year, but you mentioned OJ and 2016, the OJ documentary premiered in February of 2016 at Sundance. And that was when, obviously, that was 8 episodes and 450 minutes. So the guy who did this is Mike Tolan, and he said at the time, so it premiered at Sundance, a OJ doc, and then Making a Murderer had just premiered on Netflix at 10 episodes. So people are now
Yeah.
consuming long form documentaries, multi-part documentaries, and so it was basically his thing. He took that under his wing trying to get his production company to get it done. And this is a guy who was behind things like Arliss, Coach Carter, Varsity Blues, Smallville, One Tree Hill, which I got a soft spot for One Tree Hill. That's one of my shows from back in the day. Basketball and
Of
teen
course.
drama, of course I'm in on that, right? Do you know who I am here? Right? But
It's like
so
my sweet spot.
exactly. So, and actually, that, if I'm not mistaken, was filmed at Michael Jordan's high school, One Tree Hill. If I'm not mistaken, like the basketball scenes,
At Laney,
I'm
was it
pretty
really?
sure it was. If I got my facts
Wow.
correct, but yeah, my guy was able to finally get a meeting with MJ later on that year in June, and it wasn't even guaranteed to be a meeting. Like, it was just kind of like Michael's. He has these two like power brokers around him, and they were kind of like, yeah, just come hang out with us. He's going to be here because the draft's going on. So hopefully he can get some time and make the pitch to him. And part of my guy's pitch was he had this like lookbook type of thing, right? Like a
Yeah.
booklet basically advertising himself to Mike. And on the first page, he wrote a
Oh, with
letter.
the credit
Exactly.
and with the credits
But
at the
but
back of
the
the book.
first thing though was the first thing was a letter he wrote to him, and it said, "Dear Michael, every day kids come into my office wearing your shoes who've never seen you play. It's time." So obviously that's something that would hit Mike. But then at the very end, I know you'll appreciate this, Webby, and I know you know the story,
Yeah.
but I just want to see
I
you
did read this.
smile
Yeah.
anyways. So he says at the very end, the last page was basically like showing his credits. And so it's showing like all the things that his production company had done at Mandalay Sports Media. And so there's a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, there's Hank Aaron, there's Varsity Blues, Coach Carter, and so forth. And MJ's like actually looking through this with like his reading glasses on. And then he's actually looking at them, and at the bottom right corner is Iverson. And MJ kind of looks up and he's like, "You did that?" And Tolan didn't know how to answer. So he kind of like froze on the spot because this is like his chance, right? And he's like, "Oh shit, like did he
Right.
not
Yeah.
like
You
it or
don't want to mess
whatever?"
it up.
And Tolan wondered if he like messed up, and he's like mumbles like, yeah, I did that." And Jordan took his glasses off, looked up, and said, "I watched that thing 3 times, made me cry. I love that little guy." Then he walked around his desk, extended his hand, and said, "Let's do this." So basically, the Allen Iverson doc got us to this point right here.
Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
Philly fan, how does
Exactly.
that make you
You
feel?
know, just it made me feel great. I mean, I just love the story, and I love that Jordan loves Iverson as much as we do.
Exactly.
Like game recognized game, right?
Game, Webby. You cut to the core of me, Webby. Game recognized game, right? So we
That's
get
it.
to this point where everyone is so excited about this. The doc is finally here. There's so much talk because we're in Canada, but obviously we know there's people that watch and listen that are from the States. But so for people who don't know, in Canada, we don't have ESPN. So the doc wasn't on ESPN in Canada. The doc was on Netflix, but it
No, well,
wouldn't come out until
Netflix
3 a.m.
Netflix paid that money.
Yeah, so it's a co-production with Netflix and ESPN. So Netflix has the international rights, ESPN has the American rights. So in Canada, it wasn't coming out on Netflix until 3 a.m. in Canada is was the timing. So that left a lot of people in a
Unless
conundrum, right?
unless you could get around it.
For sure. And obviously, people who follow this podcast know that I got to tiptoe a little bit here because there's political connects.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will quote one of our friends who I know you saw this tweet because you liked it too. And it said, it said, media members, quote, you should never illegally pay for stream, or sorry, you should never illegally stream things. It costs good people jobs. Pay for content. Also, media members, well, I have to illegally stream this because if I don't, others will live tweet about it before I can. I just thought that was the perfect thing to sum up what was going on last night.
Exactly.
And I'm going to be honest here. Of course I streamed it. Like let's be serious for a second here, right? It's not like this thing was on TSN or some other like normal cable service that we get. Netflix is a paid subscription service. Why would you assume that everybody has Netflix? I know that we do assume that in 2020, but that's not
Everybody has
necessarily the case.
Netflix.
Everybody does have Netflix, but follow me for a second though. It's not like you can expect that people aren't gonna just go find it or pay an extra whatever on top of whatever you're already paying for your cable services. Like you can't, that's not a realistic expectation to me that you think people are going to be out here holding on to in 2020 when you can find anything in a simple click of a button. Like I get the greater cause here.
Yeah.
We're talking about Netflix. Like it's not TSN, it's not Sportsnet. We're talking about Netflix. Of course you're going to stream that shit illegally. Why wouldn't you? It's not coming on TSN or Sportsnet. And it became such a
No.
debate today that I didn't really understand because I'm like, you're streaming it or watching it on Netflix. What's the difference? Am I wrong here? Am I missing
Well,
something? We're not taking anyone's job
what's
by streaming something that's on Netflix.
no? What's funny was I was like, why? What I couldn't understand is why it wasn't on TSN if TSN has the rights to ESPN films, da da da. But that's why Netflix ponied up the money. Netflix has that the FU money or the FME money that they can totally price out TSN and Sportsnet even if they wanted to combine their revenues to show this. So, hey, yeah, exactly. Listen, it doesn't matter to me. I wasn't going to wait till 3 a.m. If this thing was streaming live and it's about Michael Jordan, I'm going to be
I'm
watching
in.
it. I'm going to
Yeah.
find a way.
Like there's no way that we're all sitting here. Like I was trying to think of if I didn't stream it. Imagine sitting down and me waiting from 9 o'clock until 3 a.m. That's legit 6 hours waiting to watch this
Yeah,
thing because it's not like I would have been like we're children of the Michael Jordan generation. I'm not sitting around and
yeah.
waiting till 3 a.m. to watch it on Netflix. I'm sorry, that's just not a thing. And you know what it made me think of? It made me
Plus,
think
then
of
I wouldn't even be able to pick up my phone and check Twitter because I would have most of the people that I follow tweeting about Michael Jordan documentary and spoiling for me. I'm not having that.
which is also part of the fun of consuming media in 2020, right? The shared experience that we get to
Yeah.
have with all these other people. That's part of the game. That's part of the experience. But you know what it made me think of? There's a Chris Rock bit where he's talking about drugs and why like drugs and alcohol should all be legal, which obviously alcohol is, but his whole bit is
Right.
about how, at one time alcohol was illegal, alcohol was drugs and they made it legal, blah blah blah. And he's like the reason why they're going to keep making certain drugs legal is because they can't keep up. And every time you continue to make something else illegal and turn that legal, there's some dude in his basement that's figuring out a new way to get fucked up. So, as much as you
Yeah,
try to
exactly.
stop people from getting their fix, there's going to be some dude in his basement trying to figure out a new way to get fucked up. And for a
100%.
lot of us, it almost felt like yesterday what was the term? The cocaine circus? What was the
The,
term?
the Chicago Bulls cocaine traveling circus.
Yes, right? Where we were all Tyrone Biggums waiting for this documentary to start.
I need the fix. I need my fix, man.
Needed the fix. So I can't lie to
And
you.
now I got to wait another week.
For the Rodman episode, which is Sunday. Sunday's the Rodman episode. The first one is like, you know, that's going
Oh,
to be
really?
fuego fire. But okay, let's get to the fire of
Yeah.
what happened last night, right? So it's first off to start this doc with Puffy and Mace being around the world was like a peek into my life in 97, 98. Like it was a window
Okay.
into my childhood. Go on, go on.
So I wanted to get into this. I also the musical cues were fantastic. The
Okay.
LL when he's torching the Celtics was amazing. But my whole thing was that Jordan was never a hip hop guy.
Never. There's quotes out there of
Ever.
him dissing hip hop.
And it's so strange to me that this 10 episode documentary series, now obviously like I get that the influences are the same, but shouldn't it all be like Anita Baker songs and like you know like I love it too. Like, yeah, give me the Biggie and the Mace, give me the LL, give me.
But here's
They had more Biggie later in the episode, but I was like, for a documentary about a guy who hated hip hop so much, this is a little strange.
did you see that story Nori told? Noriega was on someone's podcast or someone was on Noriega's podcast, but he was telling a story of one All-Star weekend, and it was an MJ party maybe, or some All-Star weekend party, and Red and Meth are there, and someone goes, Noriega's like, yeah, Red and Meth are there, and someone leans over to MJ and they're like, hey man, Red and Meth are here, they want to meet you, and he goes, fuck hip hop. And Nori was so stunned. He's like, I heard the motherfucker say it too. Like, this is not a story. He's like, this is not a story somebody told me. I watched the motherfucker say that. Fuck hip hop. Fuck rap. And the way that Nori sells the story is so good that he didn't even care.
See, it's funny. I wonder what MJ's reaction is to those songs in his documentary, right?
True. Very true. Very true. It's so funny. But so we get this montage of Puffy and Mace being around the world, and you're introducing all the characters. It's good to see, you know, Steve Kerr even, and Mike and Scotty and Phil and Dennis, and we get to this scene of the kid in the middle of the road. Like, so basically I wrote down a bunch of notes. I'm just going to stop with random scenes and stuff, and we'll just bust some jokes. So the little kid who stops in the middle of traffic gets off the bus
by the Corvette.
Yes, and walks over to the Corvette to get Mike's autograph in the middle of traffic. It's like, where are your parents? Like, how did your parents let you do that? Like, I get that it's Mike, but it's literally in the middle of traffic. Like,
it's good parenting. Like, do you know how much that's going to be worth? Like, they were thinking ahead.
This is in the pre-cell phone era, where at least like now I could understand it, because clearly the parents would pull out their phone and be filming this happening, right? But this is before then. But I still thought that was pretty funny.
They wouldn't have Klay Thompson's uncle there to film it,
right? So the other part of episode 1 that was so big was, as we mentioned, setting the scene of what's going on. So the Bulls had just won. They do a lot to show the Bulls after they win their 5th title. And there's a lot of talk, like, on the podium after winning their 5th title already, about what's going to happen next year. Is Scotty going to be back?
Yeah.
Is Phil going to be back? Is Mike going to be back? And tell me if you had the same reaction I did. I just couldn't believe that it's right after the championship. You've just won 5, and there's a question about whether or not you're going to bring everyone back to try to go for 6. That was so weird to me. What did you think while watching that?
And I tweeted this last night as I was watching it, especially during this first bit, was that I'm old enough to remember those championships and the scene around the Bulls, because I was a huge Jordan fan when that happened. And I was young enough to not really know what a general manager did.
Yes.
And I watched SportsCenter religiously, read the paper about what was happening with the Bulls religiously. And it's like, we're going to break it up. We're going to, we're going to rebuild. Like, the whole thing was that these guys were old. They weren't going to be able to do it. And it was the organization first rather than Jordan first. And I was like 12. As a 12-year-old, almost 13, I was like, well, this general manager, like, why is he just screwing with Michael Jordan? Like, he has
Yeah.
the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
Why are you overthinking it?
It's like, imagine that Michael Jordan would have to say, we're entitled to keep this thing going until we lose it. And then says, like, the Cubs at the point, he's like, the Cubs have been rebuilding for 42 years. I think that's what he
It's a great
said.
line.
Great
It was a
line.
great line.
So good by Mike. But at the end of the day, it was just so weird to see that happen. And, think of it in context of where sports is now. Like, can you imagine LeBron having to, like, beg to keep the team together?
It happened. It happened.
What do you mean?
This same thing happened. Like 9 years ago
LeBron begging?
with the Dallas
Oh,
Mavericks.
I see. Yeah, but it's not Mike.
The Mavericks. No. The Mavericks beat the Heat in six
Okay,
games,
yeah, yeah,
five
yeah,
games,
yeah. I
six
got you. I
games,
got you.
and they didn't. And they didn't run it back. They were the world champions,
Oh, you're
and
talking about the
they
Mavs. Yeah,
let
yeah.
they let Chandler walk. They didn't run it back, and that's just one, and that was ridiculous to us.
I thought you meant
This
I thought
was
you meant I thought you meant the Heat for a second there, and I was like, oh, but I thought you were talking about, like, if they had lost the second year, which they almost did to the
yeah.
Celtics in the playoffs, right? That might have been blow up time for that squad. But I mean, just in terms of Bosch was probably getting traded for sure, right? But I know what you're saying.
But I
It's
mean that Mavs team was good, and they had a good nuke. They had Jason Kidd, and
mhm.
they had all the right pieces together. They weren't like obviously not even close to Michael and Scotty and Rodman, but
Yeah,
it was a championship squad that they did not retain for the next year.
yeah, it was super weird. But we get introduced to this Jerry Krause character, and, like, again, much like you, I remember, like, I'm old enough to remember Jerry Krause, obviously, but to remember the intricate details of what was going on at the time. But the first thing that came up that I thought was super hilarious was the fact that my guy was a baseball scout. And then when Reinsdorf
Yeah,
bought
for the White
for the
Sox.
White
For the
Sox,
White Sox, who like what kind of success? Well, I guess he maybe had scouted Frank Thomas,
yeah, I
Ozzie Guillen,
don't, I don't know. But at the
Blackjack
time,
McDowell. Like, but other than
Blackjack
that,
McDowell, that's a solid
you
reference.
like
That
that
was
one?
that was my guy back in the day. Yeah, that was my guy.
It's an
Yeah,
old
that's
one.
a good one. That's a good one. I remember playing what we call Burby, which I know people call wall
Yeah,
ball, depending on where you're from. But
yeah,
we
or red ass.
no, baseball, but against the wall with the box, or box ball. Is that what people call it?
Oh, KKKK.
Right? Like, I know
Yeah,
it's the all
box ball, box
it's all
ball.
dependent to where people are from, but for us, we called it Burby, and we would always, like, mess around and try different pitchers' windups. And Blackjack McDowell was always one of mine that I'd pull out every once in a while as a joke. But so Kraus basically just asked to be the GM of the Bulls. That's how it played out in the doc, anyways. And he ends up getting the job. But we get introduced to the fact that he really doesn't get along with MJ, Scotty, or Phil, which seems so ridiculous in 2020 professional sports that that's even a possibility. But back then it was. And then we get all these clips of MJ just, like, ripping into him, but it all leads or seems to stem from Krause after that championship doing an interview in which he says organizations win titles, not players. Even though he said he was misquoted, the point still remains what you were trying to say.
I was gonna say he was like, oh well, they totally left out a word, but even with that word in, I mean, he was still saying the same
I,
thing.
I,
He was saying that the organization was above the player.
like, I couldn't help but think, like, yeah, my dude, don't get me wrong. You made some trades, you brought in some good players, but yo, you got MJ. Just chill out and enjoy the ride, enjoy the run.
Now, you do have to be impressed with what he did, especially after Jordan came back. I mean,
For
putting that
sure.
team together, because you forget that Rodman was really, really late in his career on those teams, and then to get the Steve Kerr,
Mm-hmm.
and I think
Kukoc
it
even.
wasn't, yeah, was it Weddington at that time?
But I'm saying even to get Kukoc at the time, like, there's a lot of stuff that he did, and even with the first go round, right? The
He was
trade to get
executive of the
Scotty,
year. I mean,
yeah, the trade to get Scotty, he got Horace Grant,
yeah,
he traded Oak for Bill Cartwright. Like, he made the right moves. Like,
when they
I'm not
needed to
denying
do
that.
that.
I'm not denying that. He made the right moves. But you can't be battling with MJ like that. But it gives you the kind of it gave you the defense, I guess, MJ would have when they started playing the clips of MJ just ripping into my guy, which, like, one of the early ones, they show my guy at practice, and MJ looks at him and he's like, "Oh, how are those diet pills treating you? They seem to be not working too well as they're making you shorter." Like, yo,
No,
I'm
my
like,
favorite
yo,
was the
come
one
on, man.
later when they're in the tunnel and he's like, "Oh, Jerry, you want to come out and run layup line with us?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're gonna have to lower the rims then." So
I was
good.
watching because Sports Center came on right after the doc, and Scott Van Pelt had Jackie Mack on. And Jackie McMullen was telling the
Oh,
stories from back in the day of them just like being relentless. She said that they used to call my guy Crumbs because
oh
he'd
yeah,
be
yeah, I
eating
did.
and he'd always have shit spilling on his shirt. And they would call him Crumbs. And I'm just like, yo, the level of disrespect that my guy was facing. I
And
was
then
like, whoa, man.
you want to talk about disrespect? They get into it a little bit as well with the Tim Floyd thing. Tim Floyd was a coach at Iowa State,
Hmm.
and I guess he and Jerry Krause got to be very chummy. There was stories all throughout the media that he was going to be the next coach of the Bulls. He goes fishing with Jerry Krause. Jerry Krause gets married. He invites the entire Bulls staff, team, everything except Phil Jackson, and instead invites Tim Floyd. And guess who the coach was? Like, this is how opaque or how transparent, like, what Jerry Krause was trying to do was that, of course, the next coach of the Bulls was Tim Floyd, and he lasted, what, a year or two?
But was Tim Floyd like? It's not like Tim Floyd was Coach K. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like he was a juggernaut at
Yeah.
Iowa State. Like, that's a part that was so weird to me, right? Like, it's not like my guy was, put even Patino, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can understand the world where Patino gets gassed or Calipari gets gassed, but like Tim Floyd, like
Yeah.
Iowa State was never that squad that you're gassing them that much. That
I mean,
this
that was
guy,
even before. They were when they had they they were when they had former Bull
Marcus
Marcus
Pfizer.
Pfizer,
I
but
knew you were
that
gonna say that.
that was later. That was later.
But imagine that. Imagine MJ. MJ's like, well, first off, he made it clear the only coach he's playing for is Phil Jackson. So Tim Floyd, he definitely wasn't taking that dude seriously, right? But you're right. At this point, you just see the levels of disrespect. Phil's doesn't have a contract. He ends up just signing for the 1 year after meeting with Reinsdorf. Like, Kraus couldn't even meet with Phil to get the deal. But Phil even says he was told after that, this will be your last season. And I thought that was just like incredible to see the turmoil that these guys were heading into the season with. And that's before we even find out about the Scotty stuff, which, you know, we find out. I'm laughing because I just saw the word beret in my notes. And this is the part where they introduced that they started the season. Their preseason sched included a tournament in Paris, and MJ
Yeah.
brought out all the swag. My guy was rocking the
You know,
berets. He had all the swag for the trip to Paris with the Bulls, and it's
oh,
like,
the before he goes on the TV show and the guy asks him for the autograph. Just well, first of all, the look that MJ gives him before the guy's like, no, get out of here. But then number two is the suit that MJ is
oh yeah.
wearing for that TV interview is like from the classic MJ suit collection. I mean, that is
So,
one of the all timers.
and you mentioned Twitter earlier. Twitter was just amazing to watch the show with, but someone was trying to break down MJ's fits, and they were like, "Wait a second! Like early on, when they go back to his high school and college days, like my guy looks like he's all right." And so the conclusion they came to was his mom's must have been buying his clothes for him early on,
Oh, so,
right? And so his fits are all right early on, but then after a while,
yeah,
when
on the course, man, he was looking on the course. He had the great golf fit.
but he starts buying his own fits, but at that point he's too big time, so no one around him is gonna be like, "Yo, man, you can't
No one's
rock
gonna
that."
say no.
You can't rock that, bro. He's too big time by that point. I thought that was funny, but the Paris trip was pretty funny because they're playing against all these like EuroLeague teams. There's no Scotty, there's no Rodman, and MJ's still out here killing it. And again,
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of moments where I do this, where I try to picture that in the context of what goes on in 2020. But we talk about load management right now, and MJ's out here giving these EuroLeague squads like 35 a night in preseason. I'm like, what is, like, this guy is incredible. That's the stuff where I'm like, the GOAT. That's where the GOAT stuff comes from. There's no nights off.
Yeah.
Anybody can get the work.
Now, that's a great point because not only does he go out and absolutely annihilate this Euro team, but and like, but afterwards he's so flippant with the winning the championship. He's like, "Oh, Phil, you can even give that one to Jerry." And he's on the bench, and the guy's like, "Oh man, I finally won a game!" Like he must be new to the Bulls, and he's like, "This one doesn't
That
count."
doesn't count.
But like to him, it doesn't count, and yet he still gives this Euro team buckets all game.
Hmm. Yeah, it's awesome. It was awesome to see, and they do such a good job. Like, you get the bit of the behind the scenes footage, but then we get some of the shit where they go back to what the Bulls were like pre MJ. And it's something that's not really talked about that much because I didn't really know much about it. But Reinsdorf was talking about how the Bulls used to get outdrawn by the indoor soccer team
By the Sting,
in Chicago.
the Chicago Sting.
And it makes sense
Yeah, the
when you
Bulls.
think of,
They were on the verge of
yeah.
collapse. Like they were drawing anybody.
And when you think of, just how big the Bears were, obviously, you think of how big the Cubs were, like, it makes sense to think about it in that sense. But when you compare it to an indoor soccer league team, it's like, wow, that is super weird. But I love this part of the doc because we got introduced to this trick that I'm sure you're going to see in documentaries to come over and over and over again.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the thing is,
This is the best part of this
because you're
documentary.
dealing with MJ here, right? And you're trying to get a lot of emotions out of him. You're trying to get real time reactions from him. And what this guy does is genius. What the director does is genius. He hands him an iPad to watch a video of MJ's mom, who, by the way, looks to be the same age as MJ at this point. Like,
Yeah,
MJ
right.
almost looks older than his
So
mom's.
funny. Has that same thing that MJ does of kind of like talking up here, like out of the side
Mm-hmm.
of the mouth up here.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, MJ does. Oh, you can totally see the similarities.
Oh yeah, it's totally awesome. But so the clip is MJ sending, it's his mom reading a letter that MJ sent her when he was at UNC. And first off, awesome trick. You could tell it hit MJ, got him in all the feels. He's like asking for her to like send him money. He's telling her that he's okay, things are going all right. But you could tell that he was like, it had him in all the feels.
So what was great about that whole letter that he wrote to his mom is that if you've ever been away from your parents at university or anything, that's something that every kid has written, whether it's through a letter or an email or left a message with their mom. That's why it was so cool to see. It's like, Mom, I need some money. Here's my account number. If you can help me out, that'd be great.
It is so cool because it humanized MJ, right? And I don't know how many human moments as fans we've gotten to see Michael Jordan have all these years, right? Like, it was so cool in that sense to see him, because to me the cool part about it was he's like the superhero type character. And in that moment where you're just a kid talking to your moms asking for help, like, that was really cool to see. But also cool to see was all those highlights of him in college, and hear Roy Williams talk about just how he came into UNC wanting to be the best player ever. And
Yeah.
Roy Williams kind of explaining to him like, yo, dude, you gotta, like, if that's what you want, like, you gotta work for it. I thought that was really, really cool. Do you know what I mean? And he kind of said, I like James Worthy steps up and he says, I was better than he was for about 2 weeks. Right.
For like 2 weeks.
That's incredible. But yeah, I'll never get tired of seeing the championship game, right? Jordan hitting the shot in college, but to get the
Yeah.
backstory of like being in the huddle and Dean Smith basically drawing up this play for Mike, like, swing it and Mike's going to be open. I thought that was really cool. And the fact of he's not, or the transition from being Mike Jordan to Michael Jordan, as he so eloquently put it, but seeing that moment develop where, oh, they were giving it to him because they knew that he could hit that shot, but there was no way the other team was expecting him to take that shot. That aspect of it was like a nice little twist that I wasn't expecting, that that was really cool. Just another angle of this story that we've all seen and watched so many times over, right?
Yeah, and just how that shot and that win gave him the confidence and really propelled him to like greater heights as he became a sophomore and a junior. And those were the clips that kind of blew me away. Were those like utter dominance of the ACC as he's just on fast breaks and splitting two defenders and just crazy finishes at the rim. Like, uh,
There was
I mean,
that
we're going to get into the draft soon, but I mean,
well,
I don't
there's
know how
that
you
one
take him
crazy
third.
block. Well, there's that one crazy block where my guy like,
Oh,
hits his head on the backboard. Like,
on the backboard. Remember, and we were working together at the score. The only other time that I've seen that is Blake Griffin.
yes, yes, it was insane. Absolutely insane. And as you mentioned, you get to the draft, MJ's third overall, and same thing, we still are trying to like find ourselves in that world where he's not MJ yet, right? Where people still don't really argue Hakeem being taken ahead of him, but obviously Sam Bowie has become this sort of like historical figure as the guy
Trivia
taken ahead
question.
of MJ. But one of the best or most memorable scenes of episode 1 is MJ talking about, obviously my guy did his research, the director did his research and has a story of, or has insight into, let's just say, the extracurriculars that the early MJ Bulls teams were up to, and described
You
it
bet.
as the Bulls traveling cocaine circus. Is that what it was?
I mean,
The
at the
traveling cocaine
time in the
circus.
NBA, man, at, at the time in the NBA, they weren't the only team that was like that. I
For
mean,
sure.
the early '80s, like late '70s teams, they were like it was a big problem in the NBA.
Yeah, massive problem in the NBA. And MJ just laughs, bursts out laughing hysterically, which was like one of the funniest things to see. And I kind of thought that he was laughing to buy time to kind of like duck the question. But then he goes in and tells this story of early years, and they're on the road somewhere, and he was walking into one of his teammates' rooms, knocks, and he hears them like, shuffling around. It's like, who is it? And he says, it's
Like, oh
MJ.
no, there's somebody at the door.
Yeah, they're all like nervous, but MJ, they end up letting him in. And it's just like he says, like, there's drugs everywhere, girls everywhere. And he's kind of like, oh, I'm out of here. And he kind of just left. And we had an interaction last night on Twitter where I was kind of like, is that really how it went down? Like, do we really think that's how it went down? And who knows? I don't know. I wasn't there. But I believed it a lot more after they had the other teammate who was in, because there's only one other teammate from those early days that was in the doc that
Yeah,
kind of corroborated, saying that MJ wasn't really down with that in the early days. He wasn't really around. He was on his own as the rookie. And you alluded to something just talking about him being like such a young, shy kid that you could totally see that happening, right?
absolutely. And he had that like those blinders on, of what he had learned in university. Oh, I got to be the person who, and he says it in the documentary. He's like, I showed up there, I found out who the leader was, and I was like, I'm going to be better than that guy. And you don't do that if you're going to be in the circus
True.
or partying in that room, right?
It's
Like,
true.
and you're right. I mean, he's what at that time, like 21, 20, and
Yeah.
and just like not, he's very much like, coming from a strict household like he did. Like he's kind of a mama's boy. They said that his mom was there in the apartment with him all the time. So yeah, I didn't get that vibe that he was out there going nuts with the circus, as we'll call it.
And this is when Barack, another key moment in this that went viral,
Former
we get
Chicago
introduced to
resident.
President Barack Obama. But in this Jordan doc, he's keyed as former Chicago resident. which like the internet sometimes I think doesn't realize when it's being trolled. Do you know what I mean? Like the internet's clearly being
What,
trolled and they're not realizing it.
didn't we have a producer who told us that you never key the president and you never key Wayne Gretzky?
Yeah, I do remember that. I do remember that.
Was that Glennie Mack or something that told us that?
It might have been. It might have been. I don't remember who, but it definitely might have been. Two people you don't key, the prime minister. Yeah, the prime minister and Wayne Gretzky. I think I do remember something to that effect. Then all of this kind of leads into the second episode because the way that the first one ends is the ring ceremony happens. Scotty gets super emotional because he's out with an injury. He's recovering from surgery. And then Scotty's kind of in tears and kind of gives like an emotional reception, which leads us into episode 2, which is the backstory of Scottie Pippen, who, comes from like, I mean, small town Arkansas to say the least. You get that whole backstory to really give you an idea to explain how he ends up in a situation where he signs that terrible contract that's like, what was it, 8 years or 7 years for 18 mil? And Scotty is what, the sixth highest paid player on the Bulls. Luke Longley makes more money than him. He's the 122nd highest paid player in the NBA. And my guy's cheesed. So it comes to the summertime. He needs to get surgery. And he said he didn't want to fuck up his summer. So he doesn't have the surgery until the start of the season. And the Bulls are not happy about this. No one on the Bulls are happy. Do you agree with Scotty's decision? Or are you kind of like, nah, that's kind of selfish?
On Scotty's part, listen. At that point, he'd been in the league now for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for Reinsdorf to go on the record and say that he told Scotty not to sign that contract, first of all, I think that's BS. And then for him to have uh, I think for him to have the kind of rule of not being able to restructure his contract. I think when you have the second best player in the NBA, somebody that the best player in the NBA loves playing with and is so, like responsible for the success of your organization, I think you can like hold that rule and help this guy out. Because
Yeah.
obviously, like you said, that first contract that he signed, he had two people, his dad and his brother, who were in wheelchairs in a family of 12 in Arkansas. Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, getting that money as soon as he could to help out his family, that shouldn't be seen as a negative towards Scottie Pippen. That should be seen as a positive. And as the owner of that team, you should want to help him out by restructuring that deal. Now, the other thing is that we should not be rolling a tear for Scottie Pippen, who made over $100 million in his playing days.
Yeah, what was the stat? I think it came out, the numbers came out that he actually made more money in his NBA career than Michael Jordan did, like just from his NBA
Yeah,
contracts, right? So, and that's with Mike making like 36 in his in that same season. Scotty's making like 2, MJ's making 36.
yeah,
But yeah, so definitely it was an interesting situation. But in terms of the team, to me, it was interesting to see MJ come out and also think that Scotty was being selfish. And he didn't like the move that Scotty was rehabbing his injury at the start of the season. And the Bulls got off to like a 4-4 start. Um, and they're just not off to a good start at all without Scotty. Then we get to the point where I didn't remember this Scotty actually demanding a trade before he even came back to play. I don't even remember that part. Him demanding the trade with MJ. Like imagine being on a team with Michael Jordan and you demanding a trade out. Like that seems so
yeah.
weird. No?
No, the weirder part was that it didn't happen. I mean, like that's another thing that I remember. It's like it was going to happen. He had
Mhm.
requested a trade. It was just, what are the Bulls going to get back? Is it going to be Sean Kemp? Is it going to be a bunch of pieces, a bunch of draft picks for the next year? Like, apparently, one of the deals that, I mean, when I was super young, I didn't know about was that
Mhm.
he was almost traded to the Raptors for Tracy McGrady.
Imagine that, right? Imagine that. I mean, I bet you he gets traded to the Raptors and holds out, so he never actually plays for the Raptors. That kind of seemed to be a
Right.
theme back then. But
Yeah.
uh, still, that would have been super interesting to see. And, if you think about where Scotty was at the time, they showed the stat yesterday on ESPN. The 122nd highest paid player in the NBA right now is Andre Roberson. So imagine that. That's so fucked up, right? So you kind of get where Scotty's coming from, but it seemed like everyone else involved, MJ, Phil, Steve Kerr, they all kind of gave in and said that Scotty took things too far, right? Like he was berating Krause like in front of everyone, belittling him so bad, taking it way overboard. And then when you add that to him also sitting out with an injury beforehand and a surgery he could have had in the offseason, I think that's a bad look for Scottie Pippen, no?
No, I agree with you. It definitely doesn't come off great. Jordan's rapport with Jerry Krause is definitely insulting, but at least he's kind of like, yeah, making a bit of a joke about it, being like, but that stuff in the bus, it sounded like it was really mean and didn't just
Yeah.
happen once, happened multiple times. But the thing is that I don't think that he came off that bad. I
Okay.
really don't, because first of all we've seen many players, Shaquille O'Neal included.
Hmm.
What is it? I'm not going to rehab. I'm going to rehab on company time.
On company
Like
time. I got hurt on
that's
company
something that
time. I'm gonna
happens.
rehab on company time.
Exactly. So I'm sure Scotty like that had the same kind of reaction to what he was going through. I think that it's Scotty's agent that really takes the brunt of not being great in this show. Like to not be able to come through for your client on multiple occasions. Definitely, he should have gone with a different representation, as we might say.
Yes. So I think really the reason I'm left with that was because I was thinking of it like just how the cliffhanger ended. The cliffhanger had me feeling like, ooh, Scotty, you don't look good at all. You're demanding to be traded away from MJ. All your teammates are saying you're way too harsh on Kraus, and like you're basically quitting on your squad, right? Like none of this is a good look for you as Scotty Pippen. But as you mentioned, hey, it was still super interesting times and crazy times. But I also think for me, that end part of this episode that was really cool was going into the young MJ and talking about, in his second season when he gets hurt and kind of just how that whole thing went down, how he was injured and the minutes restriction. What did you make of MJ just arguing back and forth with Reinsdorf essentially about what should happen with him being injured? What did you make of that whole back and forth?
Well, it's something that can never happen now in the day and age that we live in, because I mean back then in the was it 85, 86 season, he hurts himself and then goes down to North Carolina where they think that he's going to take some classes, maybe rehab a bit, get in the pool. He's playing 5-on-5 with the team. It's like that could never happen nowadays because there would be video of it, Instagrams of him playing. The team would probably send, you know, 10 people to go with him. But back then, it was a little more laissez faire. It was a little more, do what you want. And so they didn't find out that he had been playing 5-on-5 for, what did they say, 3 hours every day until he came back. And they were like, oh, what? So I thought that was pretty good. And then the other thing that I liked was after that game against the Pacers, where they ended up winning to make the playoffs. The coach at the time, I forget what his name was, but he had, they made the playoffs. Everybody's super happy. You can see in the viz how pumped Jordan is that Paxson made that shot, and everybody's hugging. And then the story goes, they go into the locker room and shut and lock the door, so Jerry Krause couldn't get in there.
It's like it's like the generations of Chicago Bulls teams that just didn't like Jerry Krause. Right?
Yeah,
It's like that's a full decade before this Scottie Pippen thing is going on. And yet the same shit was happening in 86 right? So we're going from 97 to 86 and not much has changed. But you can see the whole way why MJ is the way he is because we get to this point where he's battling with the front office because all he cares about is coming back and winning, and they're not on the same page at all. And they have that cool back and forth with Reinsdorf, where Reinsdorf's trying to tell him, listen, the doctors are saying, yes, there's a 90% chance you'll be fine, but there's a 10% chance you'll get hurt. And he runs through that whole thing, right? Where he's like, if you had 10 pills and nine of them would you'd be fine, but one of them would kill you, would you take the pill to fix your headache? And
Because how bad's the fucking headache?
it's so good. But it shows why Mike is Mike and all these things like intertwine. And it's such a great job of storytelling to give you the background as to why he hates Kraus. It dates all the way back then, right? To when they're
Mhm.
holding him out of games and it's not about winning. It shows why he's not on the side with Scotty, right? Because Scotty's not about winning. He's watching
Not
us
about winning.
lose, and he knew that the team would be affected by him holding out, and yet he still held out, and it's not about winning at that point. So all these things make sense. And then, of course, because as we mentioned, it's great storytelling, they show what happens after MJ goes from this ridiculous minutes restriction where he's allowed to play 7 minutes per half, so 14 minutes total in a game, which is so dumb, to all of a sudden they squeak into the playoffs by winning like 30 games, right? They're the crappy 8th seed.
They're the 8th seed, and they got to play the 86 Celtics, which are like up there with the 2017 Warriors, the 96 Bulls as one of the best basketball teams of all time.
Of all time, right? And so what does MJ do in this? My guy goes from being on a 14 minutes
Gets
restriction,
buckets.
and then in his next two games when the restrictions are off, my guy goes for 49 and then 63 against one of the greatest teams of all time. And it's just incredible. And the montage, the way that they cut it to the LL, like it was so
Oh,
dope how they did it. But my guy goes for plays a round of golf with Danny Ainge the day
yeah.
before.
And he tells, hey, tell DJ I got something for him tomorrow. That was amazing. The other thing was the
Hold on,
story
do you
that
know
the
what's crazy?
Celtics
Hold on,
players.
hold on. You know that was crazy though, Webby? I was like, wait, you're telling him you got something for him now? You just gave him 49, right? It's like, how crazy is that? Like, that's incredible.
I love the Celtics telling the stories of like how mad the guys were that they had to guard Jordan. Like Bill Walton was like incensed that he had to guard Jordan. The look on Rick Carlisle's face after he got lit up in game one. And then the other one was like that montage of the 63-point game where he puts the move on Bird where he goes like between the legs, dribbles, fade, and then just dropped it. All I could think of was Dino,
Mm-hmm.
editor at Sportsnet, and the guy who makes court cuts, sitting watching that same clip of Jordan giving it to Bird between the legs, little shimmy, and then the fade right in his eye. And all I heard was Dino just yell out "sex." That's it.
Incredible, man. It was so cool to see, but I don't think people really understand how good Larry Bird was or how big of a deal it is for Larry Bird to be out here saying that that wasn't Michael Jordan playing tonight. That was God disguised as Michael Jordan. Like people don't realize how
Yeah,
big of a deal it is to have Larry Bird describe it like that. And I thought that was incredible. But then I saw on Twitter, and you get reminded of how dumb some kids are. But I saw kids say that y'all out here gassing Larry Bird, but if Larry Bird played in today's game, he'd be Joe Ingles. And I was just like, come on, man. Like, what do we?
come on,
I was like,
come on.
I've never wanted to like
What?
slap someone through a computer screen
What?
so hard. Now you could tell it's just a young LeBron fan trolling, right? But it was just like, I was like, come on, man. Like, what fuckery are we talking about right now? I never wanted to like backhand someone through a computer screen so hard.
If Larry Bird is modern day Joe Ingles, then what? Like Magic Johnson is modern day. I don't know. What
I
would
don't even
even the
know.
comp
It's
be?
so
So
ridiculous.
that was the
It's so
other. That
ridiculous.
was the other quote that I really liked. Was MJ was Magic going? Oh, we were watching MJ, and we knew he was coming. He just needed the horses.
Yeah. Yeah. That quote was obviously like super dope to see and to hear Magic like pay his respects in that way, of course. That was super dope.
Well, just that they had known, like it wasn't like Magic and Larry saying, "Well, hey, we've got this league. Don't worry about it." Like, who is this little, young kid? It's like, no, no, no. They as soon as they stepped on the court with MJ, they knew what they were dealing with.
Yeah. It was cool to see. It was such a dope doc and how they round out that story too, again, going back to just that killer instinct that Mike had and the explanation again, because it digs back into his youth and his childhood. And you see that this killer instinct that like I'm gonna go out and like take other teams' souls comes from his childhood. And the older brother comes out and he's like, yeah, I used to play one on one against him all the time. And, I couldn't let him win. And if I did, that would mean we'd have to fight. And I was like, waiting for my guy to laugh or chuckle. And it's like, no, like he wouldn't let his little brother win. And if he did win somehow, he'd beat him up. I was like, now, doesn't that explain why Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan? You see him coming of age, but he needs more horses. And then we give you the story of the horse that would come in terms of Scottie Pippen. It was just great storytelling. Left us on the cliffhanger of Scottie wanting the trade demand. And hey, we're into next Sunday, which is the Rodman episode. And I can't wait for that. I was super excited for that.
I mean, you thought Scotty's upbringing was tough, man. Rod, Rodman's is just like Central Arkansas University and Eastern Oklahoma University. Like that's what we're getting into with these guys.
You realize the backstories of, MJ getting cut in high school, Scotty being the manager of his team. It's such a like great story of just hard work, right? And like dudes that
Yeah,
have physical gifts, of course, but they bust their ass every step of the way. It was such a cool lesson in that terms. MJ Doc episode 1, we're going to try to do this every week where we break down just what went on in each and every episode. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, man. That was a lot of fun. One other thing just before we go, I wanted to bring up
it's
because
great.
these
Can't wait for next week.
yeah. Can't wait for next week at all, Webby. And, one other thing I wanted to bring up just before we wrap up here was kind of these IG live battles that were going on. We were about to tape a little earlier tonight, but I was trying to watch the Teddy Riley versus Babyface, which, like, at least they kind of had the battle tonight before, again, Teddy Riley, I think, messed it up. But they had like 500,000 people in there watching it at one point, and it was really good. It
Wow.
was like to go from one night MJ Doc to the next night an old school R&B jam had me in my like younger days, just in my feelings. It was so good. It's such a great flashback. But I want to actually go back to Saturday, where the memes were just on fire as Teddy Riley completely just messed up the whole thing. My guy tried to have a whole band, he had a DJ, he had all that messed it up. But it's that just exemplified what the actual crowning achievement was of all these IG battles, and that was RZA versus Premier. Webby, I know you're a hip hop head like I am, and that was just a throwback to the era. Talk to me about that. How much did you enjoy RZA versus DJ Premier?
I mean, I was tearing up. It was just like jam after jam. Now, the crazy thing for me about the actual battle there was, it seemed to me that like Primo threw the fight. Like I love RZA, and like Wu Tang beats are all timers. Like especially when you get into some of the solo stuff, like the purple tape stuff with Raekwon and Ghostface, and anything off of Liquid Swords is like right up my alley. But Primo has decades, decades of smashes that he can use against RZA, and it wasn't really until late. I mean, I was really happy because Above the Clouds is like such a huge tune for me growing up, and when I heard him just kind of like drop it a little bit and then came with it, I was like, we might have to give this whole thing to Primo because that is one of my all-time favorite songs. And the other great thing was, it didn't matter who was going, I knew all the lyrics. Like that's what I loved about it. It was awesome.
It was so awesome. And it was one of those things too to watch as a community. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody as a culture, everyone involved,
Yeah,
everyone in hip hop at that time. And, seeing the names and you're having the same reactions as like Diddy in the chat or Jadakiss or
yeah,
whoever, name whatever
yeah.
celebrity, everyone was just there jamming out. And everyone, I think the coolest part was the people who didn't know, I think thought Primo was going to wash RZA. And so it was kind of dope to give like people who don't know the actual history
Yeah.
lesson. Like, no, no, no. RZA's got hits. And even though Primo won, I think Primo won. I think most people think Primo won, right? But it was still
I
close.
don't know. I think RZA won,
Oh, okay. Well,
but
this is my point. I think it
I
was
really
close.
do.
I think it was close. And
Yeah, it was very close.
people
It was
didn't
very
think that going in. But it was so good to hear so many classic songs. And anytime you hear Biggie and Primo, I'm just like, I mean,
close. Oh,
right? Like anytime you
or
heard that, you're just like,
just
all right,
the 3 songs that he has on Illmatic, or the 4 songs that he has on Illmatic. Those could have been just his 4 songs. That would have been fine. But like,
well,
you're right. Like the finding out that other people online, it's like, oh, apparently, I'm not the only one who loves who loves Guru's line. Lemonade was a popular drink, and it still is. Like everybody loves that. Oh, everybody enjoys that. Okay, I mentioned Above the Clouds already. I was really really pumped to hear Criminology is easily one of my all time favorite songs of all time, regardless like Wu Tang or whatever. And then the other one was I had forgotten that Run is a RZA beat, and I mean that song was huge. That's more universal. That's later. That's later, but that is a
that
huge
song is
tune.
fuego, 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 fire. Yeah, like that song is fire. It was so dope, man. And I mentioned Primo and obviously Big, but Primo and Jay, obviously, like just the way that he started with a million and one questions, which is obviously one of my favorite songs ever. But anytime you
Yeah,
even hear Jay, like So Ghetto is such an underrated Jay track. And then hold on, after it was done, these guys were still throwing out bangers. It was so good, man.
and Cold World by Jizza, like that's a song that I absolutely love. you know, so that I was. You're absolutely right. I'm glad that like the Utes got to really enjoy all the talent that RZA brings to like those Wu solo albums were like huge. They were huge.
It was cool. It was so cool to see. It was an awesome time. And I know that, we're here trying to just give and recap some of the fun things that's going on in these tough times, but it's cool to just see people just creating dope content, right? And obviously we're getting it from the extreme of two people on IG live to a crazy 10-part Michael Jordan doc, but still they're doing a great job just for the culture, giving us stuff that we're enjoying, and hopefully we can tap into that and give y'all some entertainment as well along the way.
Now, just one more thing. One more thing. The IG Live. What is your if you got a fantasy book, an IG Live battle? Is it Dr. Dre and Diddy? Is that or what else? Like, is there another one out there that you want to see? Just Blaze and Kanye.
Like I know Kanye would have so many hits and it'd
I
be good
know.
to see, but like
I know.
Kanye would
I
just
know.
make a mockery of all this now. And like
And he'd be wearing the MAGA hat. By the way, not a MAGA hat. Not a MAGA hat.
amazing. Well played, Webby. Well played. No, I hear you.
Not.
I think I really want to see Bad Boy versus So So Def. And I think Bad Boy wins, but So So Def has enough hits that they could like make it a thing. Bad Boy versus
You'd
So
put
So
that
Def would be
above
interesting.
Dre?
Cause Dre washes most people, right? It'd probably be like who? Dre and what? Kanye? Dre and
I would think
Pharrell?
it would be Dre and Diddy.
Dre and Diddy.
Oh, I
Ooh,
just
ooh,
maybe Pharrell and
ooh.
Just Blaze would be fair.
Ooh, I don't right. So you're getting interesting. There's some ones that are out there for sure. There are ones that, but I just hope that whoever comes next realizes this is something for the culture. This is something for everyone at home in a pandemic to sit around and enjoy. This is not supposed to be some money making venture like Teddy Riley literally
No,
messed up with
no.
on Saturday because he was trying to film two
That's
things
what I
at once.
understand.
Right? He was trying
Yeah,
to
that's
film
what I
two things at
understand. That's
once
what he messed up.
and he messed up the whole thing. So skip keep it fun, keep it jokes, keep doing it for the culture, and we'll try to do the same thing here. Mr. Andrew Webster, where can the people find you if they want to hit you up on the socials, my dude?
Well, listen, I'm only tweeting during the commercial breaks of the Jordan documentary because I'm definitely illegally streaming. So you can tweet me or check out my Instagram. I'm throwing up some delicious meals that I've been making on the Instagram, and so they're both the same at awebster84.
And again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. You can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander, and like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube. Like and subscribe, tell your friends, because we're here just trying to have some fun, make fun out of just, these crazy times. So we'll be back next week to discuss the Jordan doc. And for my guy, Andrew Webster, my name is Sheldon Alexander, and I really did used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the On Blast podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time,
Peace.
see ya.
On blast.